Travis Coffey, you're very welcome to the AI6 podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, you're beaming the whole way in from Kansas. Introduce yourself and your organization, your work to our viewers and our listeners.
Yeah, I am a co-founder of Quotient AI, and I have spent the majority of my career in RevOps and sales. And most of that had a focus around building better systems and processes and really starting to try to uncover the buyer intent and those signals in the data. But what we realized is that as good as we were getting at that flywheel, we had a talent problem, which led us to creating Quotient.
And you've got AI in the name. Was this just a natural evolution given how amazing the technology has evolved?
It was. I mean, the biggest challenge that we solve is that Quotient is really about taking the guesswork out of hiring. The challenge is that all the organizations that I were a part of and the clients that we work with today is that the traditional kind of interview style yields about 50% hit rate on getting someone that's going to be successful in your organization. And when you start doing the math around that of what that actually costs your organization for every bad hire, it really becomes an issue that frankly, a lot of organizations just say, okay, we're going to build that into our model or our financials, knowing that we can't improve. But what we've been able to do is really leverage our proprietary behavioral assessment. So the unique thing about Quotient is that we go into an organization and we assess the entire team. And from there, we build a unique revenue DNA profile from your top performers. And so what we can do is as you're hiring for that role, we can run a candidate through our predictive model and we can tell you the likelihood that they will be successful in your organization.
That's pretty scary in a great way. And it just feels that that economic and that financial gap that existed in companies, you're the bridge to narrowing that. And of course, we're also going through the transformation that is the future of work. So it's almost like is it a double win?
Exactly. Because not only are we starting to identify like what are the attributes and behaviors of your top performers, right? And we're helping you start building a more of an elite team. But in addition to that, we're also understanding what are those areas for development. So now when you actually hire that candidate in your organization, you already have a head start of onboarding them, of coaching them, of developing them, because we know some of the areas that if you lean into them, it'll only make them even better.
And so very many of us are nervous about how artificial intelligence is disrupting our sector, our career, and our skill set. Does this have a value to the people in the organization as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's funny is I was looking at, and you even have a newsletter, right? And we talk about it all the time about keeping the human in the loop, right? It is so important that what we do is we're just creating an additional signal, right? We're basically helping you have a crystal ball, if you will, of being able to see who this candidate really is. But it doesn't replace judgment. It doesn't replace your experience because we actually want to enhance that. We would just want to give you the insights about this candidate to make your job easier.
So what are clients saying to you now that are rolling this out in their organizations?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that what they're starting to see is that there is this unique DNA about an organization, almost like a fingerprint, right? Because even as good as you get of like hiring in the traditional sense, what organizations have always said, and I had the same experience, is maybe you go out to your competitor and you hire away their top performer, and they come into your organization and they flame out. And you're like, well, what happened? They didn't forget how to sell, right? Between jobs. It's because what was being required at that company is completely different than what was being required at your company. And so that's really kind of the insight. And then furthermore is that part of this process is when you're going through the interviewing a candidate is we give you customized interview questions around the watch outs for that candidate. So now you can focus that interview and really understand how are these behaviors going to show up.
So this is as much about culture as it is about compute power, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because everyone always says, right? The gold standard is I want a top performer, but I also want them to be a cultural fit. And so part of this is that we're going to uncover, we know what your emotional architecture is. We know how you're going to show up under stress. And so you get, right, as a hiring manager, you get all this information to make a better decision.
So one of the things that we know about AI is that its ability to predict, right? It's a probability model,
Right.
but we also know that inherently it can be trained on bias. It can hallucinate. How have you mitigated against those threats, if you will, in your own software?
Absolutely. And this is a great question because one of our core philosophies is making sure that everything that from our predictive model, that it is explainable, right? So we are, not only do you get a score about will this candidate, the likelihood of them being successful, but we actually tell you, like, what are the attributes that are contributing to that score? What are the attributes that are detracting from that score? So that you really understand that it's not a black box of saying, yes, hire them, no, don't hire them.
Because recruitment, and I'm in Europe, right, and we're governed under the EU AI Act, and that's a risk-based piece of legislation. So recruitment would be considered high risk because AI is potentially making decisions on people's livelihoods, their careers.
Exactly. And again, that's why, what we tell every one of our clients is that do not use this as the as the measure of yes or no, right? Again, like we talked about, is like we just want to enhance your judgment, your experience, but really just giving you deeper insight to make a better decision.
And have there been any interesting patterns or trends that organizations are finding by virtue of using your platform?
Yeah, I tell you, Joanne, this is one of my favorite parts of, of my job. And that is really starting to understand how these behaviors show up. And so we measure 32 different attributes with our assessment. Okay. And each one of them comes with a specific behavior. But what we have found is that it's in the combination of these behaviors that really has power behind it. And I will tell you one that was really surprising to us as we started doing this across thousands and thousands of candidates. And that is, there's a combination of, we measure fairness, we measure empathy, and we measure curiosity. Okay. So between those three, if a candidate scores really high on all three of those, how it actually shows up is they're not a very good closer, right? Because that fairness, that empathy, that curiosity drives them to asking a lot more questions. The discovery goes on, and they're always looking for more of a win-win situation versus being able to close. Now, does that mean that that's a red flag and we shouldn't hire this candidate? Absolutely not. What it informs is, okay, now we know that this could be a caution flag. So if we hire this candidate, here's, now if I'm a manager, now I know what to look for in our coaching. So we can really start to understand and help this candidate actually be aware of it and improve on it.
So it's informing personal development plans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It goes way beyond just basically hiring the right person. Then we can transition into actually developing them, because what we do know is that there are certain attributes that are directly tied to revenue production. And so if we know where maybe you're lower in one of those, and now we give you development in that area, it's only going to supercharge your results.
And is the software then being used, and the platform being used for existing talent as well as future talent?
So that's such a great question, because what happens is we start with basically doing this for hiring. And then what it quickly turns into is then we start helping organizations on succession planning and promotion. Because again, what we can do is we can assess an entire leadership team, and we start to understand, what does that team look like? Where are their strengths? Where are the areas that maybe there are gaps? And then being able to give them insight into how to either improve that, or then, right, it goes back to hiring the right talent.
This is a wonderful example of when you are an expert in your own domain. So in Rev Ops, and for years, you've struggled with some issue that you just accept, right? It's just
Right.
the name of the game. But then this technology evolves to such a state that we can suddenly find that final piece of the puzzle and turn it into a solution that for years and decades, for centuries, has existed. It must be quite an exciting time for you.
It is. It's really exciting, and I think also just to highlight is that we view AI as not a way that how we're going to replace people.
Mm.
It is really about how can we actually start arming you with better information. But not only that, Joanne, is really starting to understand because the world is changing very fast, right? And as your organization changes, we can still identify the people that you can bring in that not only will be successful today, but have that adaptability, have that curiosity to continue to evolve as it continues to change.
And I was having this conversation on a LinkedIn post only last week on how we potentially need to change our language and not talk about talent, but actually talk about people, because talent can be agentic talent, right? We really need to
True.
put the human back in the forefront of the HR pool and the talent pool in our organization.
That's exactly right. I mean, because one of the great things about AI is that it is also helping to level the playing field for organizations. So how now do you go find that competitive edge? And that is, again, it's about people. And we really think that we believe that AI is really going to make that even more fundamentally important.
So now that you have that capability and it's being rolled out, you must have additional ideas of what else you can add without sharing any trade secrets. What are the other potential capabilities that RevOps could benefit from in with this sort of technology?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, what's interesting is, again, a lot of the companies we talk to are spending a lot of money, time, and effort into understanding the data signals about buyer intent, right? And then they're passing those leads over, those highly qualified leads, to someone who has no way that they're ever going to close them, right? And so I think really what we're trying to do is like be a great partner to the organization, not only about improving the people side of it. But then as you're spending all that time, effort, and energy in doing that, now those two are coming together. And then furthermore, I think really the thing that we see the most is that there is this emotional bias that happens, right? Whether it is how you view somebody that you work with around a promotion or not. And so what we try to do is really use these insights to remove that bias.
Mm.
So that you really start to understand who is this person at their core, what strengths do they actually bring, and not be clouded by maybe a few interactions that we've had with them.
Some commentators say that our AI chatbots know us better than we know ourselves, based on all the conversations that we've had with them. Your organizations must feel a little bit like that too.
Oh, it is, and I will tell you, as we do these profile readouts, right? It's almost like a therapy session, that when because we really understand who you are, right? We understand your core wiring, and so when we do these, it's like giving a crystal ball, and many people are like, oh my gosh, this may be a little bit too much of insight.
So what type of companies and organizations are you working with?
It's predominantly sales organizations, right? Because that is the biggest challenge, is that most of the organizations are still hiring off of that likability, right? Or what we like to call the beer test, right? So you're sitting across from a candidate, you have this emotional connection, we're having a great conversation, you think to yourself, oh, I can have a beer with them. And believe it or not, Joanne, we validated this through thousands and thousands of pages of interview notes, that it literally is coming down to that. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so it is really helpful because these roles are a huge financial commitment for many organizations. And when you get it wrong at scale, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars, that even if we move the needle 10%, that's a huge amount of savings, not only for missing out on bad hires, but now you're putting the right person in the right seat, and the opportunity that's there for them to generate revenue is so much higher.
Where do you think the technology and AI is going to take your sector over the next 5 years? That's almost a crystal ball question, and it's not an easy one.
Yeah, I think, I really believe that for the first time, that companies are now going to be able to match the right person to their organization. Because there are so many stories of people that we have talked to where they started out their career and they bounced from job to job to job and basically didn't have success. And then all of a sudden they get to a job and now they're a top performer, right? Is it because all of a sudden the light bulb went on, or was it that they actually got married up to the right organization that matched their skill set to what the organization was asking for? And I think when we look down the road, I think this is where it's really going to give the organizations that lean into this, give them a decided advantage.
Yeah, not to be facetious, but imagine if we could use your software to, match people into political roles, to match humans together in relationships. It would be remarkable.
I have more than once, I've had someone say, hey, maybe you should start a dating site with this.
It really is quite fascinating and mind blowing to get under the bonnet of what you guys are doing. What sort of setup do organizations have? Obviously, with AI, you need data, and that's how you train the model. So what sort of information is your platform using?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have this behavioral assessment. So we come in and we assess the entire team. So from there, we also ask the organization to be very specific. So sales makes it easier because there is a benchmark, right, of saying yes, they're successful or not,
Mhm.
right? So we use those two data points, and then we can build that model around that and identify what are those behaviors of your top performer. What separates us from a lot of the assessments that are out there is that we are doing this unique to your organization. Most of the assessments out there, it's not that they're bad or give you bad results, but you're being measured against a giant population.
Mhm.
So you don't really understand what is a true strength in this organization versus what is a caution flag in this organization when you're being measured against millions of people.
So when you think about where your career was and what you were doing kind of pre AI to what you are doing now, how would you describe that transition and that kind of evolution of the sector?
Yeah, everybody is under pressure to drive revenue,
Mhm.
right? And what happened in all the organizations I was a part of is that we ended up having a handful of heroes that we had to count on every quarter to bring in the number. And what really started to change is when we started to be able to identify that elite talent and bring them into the organization. No longer did we have the same risks of missing our number, or what happens if one of those heroes actually leaves the organization, and now what do we do? So now creating a deep bench of people that can actually produce changes the game. And so now we don't have to spend as much time thinking about how much coaching do we have to give this person, how disruptive is it to the culture. We can actually focus on the things about enhancing them and driving even higher revenue.
So apart from saving companies uh, thousands, millions in bad hiring decisions,
Yeah.
with better hires, are there more sales?
A lot more sales. And one of the things that we start tracking from the very beginning is how fast are the new candidates ramping up versus the candidates that you had hired in the past, right? Because that's the early indicator for us to say, yes, we are getting that right. Obviously, at the end of the year, did they hit quota or not, right? But understanding, are they ramping faster and are they building pipeline faster is a great indicator that we're on the right track.
This is a brilliant AI story. It's a brilliant business story, and it's a great story of moving from, bringing a sector into the AI age. If people are interested in finding more about the company or you, Travis, where do you want to direct them?
Yeah, you can go to our website. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, and happy to have a conversation and understand the challenges that maybe you're having that hopefully maybe Quotient can help solve.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you so much for zooming in this evening to the west coast of Ireland, and wishing you continued success, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much.